When I walk in, every ancestor move. Every cell in my body got an ancient groove. I ain't searching for truth, I embody the proof. You look at me, you see the lineage. Every obstacle shift when I rise in them.
Happy Monday, everyone, and welcome back to another segment of My Patriot Report. I am the bridge connecting the next generation to federal contracting. I am Ratwan Hill. With me, I have the man, the myth, the legend, the ambassador of peace. And if you don't know who he is, you better ask AI, Mr. Walter Cotton III. Mr. Cotton, man, how was the weekend? How you doing?
I had a very, very interesting weekend trying to digest the events that came out of the correspondence dinner. And so, I had an interesting weekend. What about yourself?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. My weekend been well, other than that event that happened three times, man, that got to be a record. 3 times trying to be assassinated is what I'm referring to. But
I would say that would represent the potential tipping point. I think Malcolm Gladwell defined that. When you have people within your nation that are angry enough to take those kinds of actions, I think it's sending some kind of a message or a signal.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Now, messages. Speaking of messages and signals, right? We've been talking about the events that happened with the Strait of Hormuz and the trickle down effects that's happened. Now, I want to talk about something we left off with on Friday, was about this draft and even them raising the age. Okay, so if this is something temporary that was, that just so happened to happen, it seems like these were telegraph signs of something that's supposed to last longer. Because why would they initiate a draft and raise the age of people who can enlist? Like, well, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, my thoughts are focused on peace, right?
Yeah.
And my definition of peace borrows from that urban philosopher's perspective. Gil Scott-Heron, who I think said it best when he said, peace is not the absence of war. It's the absence of the rumors of war and the threats of war and the preparation for war. And so the introduction or the reintroduction of the selective service process, which is the precursor to the draft, is a indicator not of peace, but of something else. And the fact that they have not only increased the age that they will accept in this selective service campaign, but I think that they're also being a little bit more liberal with the gender. That's problematic in my opinion, right? Because what it's signaling is it's signaling a philosophy, a strategy that is on more of a war footing, right? It's more of a conflict footing. And given the place that, we've evolved to as mankind, I think that there's a strong enough argument for no more wars. And that's what I'm aggressively advocating for.
Yes, sir. Now, is that something that we the people have the power to, do we have a say-so in that, in them even issuing a pre-draft registration and increasing the age?
We absolutely do, and I think that that's one of the things that my friend and former lobbyist, now author, Sophia Nelson, I believe, is trying to point out in her new work, Redefining Freedom, and that is the fact that the average American needs to be better educated to what his or her rights are under the Constitution. And if they were better if they were better educated, they better understood what those rights were, they'd be better prepared to participate in the civic process, right? Which is the process that we use to elect the representatives that implement the laws and regulations. But to date, our populace has been so dumbed down and the capabilities that they own from a participation in the elective process has been so obfuscated from them. It's been so hidden from them. If you sit down and talk to the average man or woman out on the street, he or her don't understand what their powers are. He or her are confused as to whether or not they should be focusing their voters' rights on a community election, a city election, a state or a federal election. They don't understand how these bodies interact with each other. So I think it's important right now for the people to understand, like Dorothy learned in The Wizard of Oz. We've always had the power. We had the power to cause our elected bodies to represent us in the way that we want to be represented. And we've never had more of a glaring need for us to execute our rights, execute our authorities under the Constitution than we're looking at right now.
Yes, sir. Now, when you spoke on Mrs. Sophia Nelson book about redefining freedom, the first thing that popped in my mind was, exactly what does that mean, freedom? What does that mean to be American? Like, I think we take that for granted, especially if you were born here. But then, you have people, depending on what side you're looking at, complain about immigrants taking the jobs and all the benefits. But I think we take that, most people might take that for granted if you were born here. So, from your perspective, what does it mean to be an American? What does that word freedom actually really means?
Wow, that's such an individualized term for America, where we have this melting pot of cultures. And what that means from my perspective, it means that I can bring my culture into this quilt of cultures that is America. And I have the ability to practice the beliefs that I have without the fear of prosecution from the community at large, right? I have the wherewithal to take my skills and capability and bring them into the center, into the work center, and earn from that work center the kind of resources that allow me to elevate my family to the next level. Those are the kinds of freedoms and liberties that you enjoy in a country that is truly free. So from one perspective, the economic perspective, a free country is a country you can come into with nothing. And with the sweat of your brow, right, with the ingenuity of your mind, you can build the kind of generational wealth that pulls your family out of poverty and make sure that future generations don't experience poverty. And so in a free society, you have the opportunity to grow to your highest and best use of your talents.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Now, how do we, you said that the everyday person don't understand the civic process. They don't understand what their rights are. From your perspective, how, for the everyday person that's in the rat race, they're working a job 9 to 5, they come home, they got kids, they got to take care of the kids, they're in the cycle. I see it as a kind of a challenge. Well, not a challenge because you can make time for what you want, but, I see it as a, maybe as a burden of the reason why people are, maybe not be privy to the information about their rights because they're too distracted. What are your thoughts on that? And what is a cure to that problem?
Well, it all depends on, from my perspective, how the problem developed, right? Because if the problem developed organically, right, the universe, if you will, in its evolution will correct the problem. But if the problem didn't occur organically, if the problem was a man-made problem, you have a whole different set of measures and energy that needs to be applied against it. In this particular instance, we have a problem, I think, that did not occur organically. I do not believe that this system of competition, right? This system of combating and competing is something that occurred organically because it doesn't mirror the systems that emerge in nature, right? In nature, we have systems that are cooperative because our natural systems understand the interdependent nature and relationship that we have with one another, right? And so man has somehow lost that way. And I don't think that all of mankind fits within this category, but I do think that there is a small population, right, of what we've been defining as the powers that be that have ushered in a system that is creating outcomes that is disenfranchising for humankind. And so I think we need to create a educational path that increases mankind's awareness and understanding so that we start asking for the things that we deserve. Like, I'll give you an example, that comes from, my historic background as a person of color, right? We went through a situation where people who wear my social costume were enslaved for a period of time. And they had to, fight through the system to regain some rights. And the kind of rights these individuals, my forefathers and ancestors were given were rights that were akin to something under human rights. They were given civil rights. And so we as a people need to recognize that an error doesn't become a mistake unless you don't correct it, right? And so we can look back at those offenses. We can look back at those errors, and we can make the mid-course adjustments necessary, right? So that we correct and heal the past and put the future on a better trajectory. And so what I'm basically saying is that, from my social perspective, we need to reimagine the kind of rights that we share, right, as a community in these United States. And our rights should not be focused on the rights of the citizen. They should be focused on the rights of the human.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Now, when you mentioned civil rights, now the first thing that popped up in my mind is what we've been talking about: the centralization and consolidation, and bundling of contracts, and how that is we've been speaking about USC 42 USC 1986, which is a violation of civil rights. Now, could you explain how that exactly violates people's civil rights from a contractor perspective?
There are a lot of actions that are a violation of statute that are coming out of the shock and awe executive order efforts out of this administration. And as an example, if you look at that, what is it, 14240, executive order 14240, that's calling for this centralization. What it doesn't take into account is there are statutes in our acquisition laws, policies, and procedures that are there to ensure the fair distribution of the taxpayers' dollars. And before I go to the example that you're talking about under 14 or 42 USC 1986, I want to go to another simple example that is a challenge that results from this executive order to centralize, and that is the example that we pointed to when we identified the $315 trillion worth of contracts that had been consolidated. What that action does is it violates fair competition statutes, right? There's some actions, right? Some pre-acquisition planning steps, right? There's some acquisition statutes that are being violated in this rush to consolidation. And so if the contractors that are being affronted by these actions start employing the legal remedies that are at their avail, it's going to take our acquisition process and it's going to clog it up. It's going to slow it down. And so the place that I'm operating from, when I start thinking about these policies, rights, and regulations, I ask myself the question, are the people that are asking us to implement these far-fetched strategies doing so with the express intent of enhancing our system, or are they doing these things with a more nefarious intention?
Now, we like to focus on the solution, right? So is the best solution? Just educating what we're doing now, educating the fact that the 1102s could be put in unintentional harm, or is it, just being able to have a sit down, a real conversation with them? Like, what do you see as the most viable pathway to make sure that the 1102s and the contractors are working together to eliminate this error?
Well, one of the things that I've learned in my 20 plus years of GovCon advocacy is how to stay in my lane.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and my lane is the government contracting lane. And there are educators out there that have a much more vested interest in getting their arms around that need than I do. Right, my hyper focus is on making sure that we have the economic stability, we have the economic ability to resist and have the resilience to withstand whatever affects our economy, affects us on that side of the equation. And so I'd like to get back over, into the places where I'm strong, because the education requirements are those that have to be taken up by a different community. That's not my lane.
Understood. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So let's dive into what happened with the White House Correspondents' Dinner. Now, individual just ran through, he shot a security guard. Now, what does an incident like that signal about the current state of the country?
For me, I tend to like to connect the dots, right? And when I'm connecting the dots, I like to look at, all of the available data points. And you mentioned earlier that this was the third attempt, right, of an individual to try to take this president's life. And what I like to do is I like to understand why. Like, what would motivate an individual, right, to risk their lives, and to risk their future. And so I like to look at the anatomy of the individual. I like to look at their background. And in this particular instance, when I looked at this young man, I saw the kind of concern that would make the miner in the coal mine freeze as he looked at the canary's cage and saw the canary fell off of its perch. Right. I see this event as a canary in our proverbial gold mine falling off the perch, because when you look at the background of this young man who took this action, right, this isn't a struggling individual, right? This is an individual who didn't have the possibility of upward mobility, right? This isn't an individual who dropped out of school, was disenfranchised by the system, substance dependent, mentally afflicted, any of those things, right? This is an individual who had achieved a master's degree level of education, right? So he was one of the more conditioned and educated individuals in our society, right? He was entrepreneurial, because I understand that he had a business that was, making video games or something in that area. So my point, very simply, is that based on the areas that he was performing in from a business and professional perspective, he should have been one that had a tremendous amount of hope. And so for a person to risk all of that, to make a statement like the one that was made on Saturday night, should send a shock wave throughout every red-blooded patriot in America, right? Something needs to be corrected. Something needs to be fixed, and needs to be fixed right now when we have this type of internal threat against our elected offices.
Do you think this was a isolated incident, or do you think this early indicators of a larger system under stress?
I think that this is a larger system under stress example. You had the incident where the young man recently burned down the
Mhm.
warehouse, right?
Mhm.
Because he just wanted to be paid a little bit more, right? So yeah, no, this isn't an isolated incident, right? This is America not whispering. This is America speaking to the powers that be and saying, you guys can do things a little bit different, a little bit more equitable, a little bit fairer, right? We're uncomfortable with ideas like there being a $50 billion expenditure for a war of choice that has not made America safer. As a matter of fact, it's made America a more challenging place to live. You cannot take those kinds of actions without taking in consideration the needs of we the people.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Now, we have events like that, and we have them, doing a No Kings March. But the fact of the matter is that stuff never really produced any real results. And he even said that, he just felt like he had to take things into his own hands. But we're saying that that's not the appropriate way to go about it at all. And the fact that, like you said, we the people have
Now,
rights.
when, now that's breaking news that you're bringing to me. You said he felt he had to take things into his own hands. Are you talking about the suspect from the
Yes.
correspondence dinner?
Yes. He had a
Please.
manifesto. He had a manifesto of saying, he called pedophile, all these other things. He was like, he just felt like he had to take things into his own. He had to take things into his own hands, so that was where his mind led him to going down that pathway.
Understood. Understood. I mean, we shouldn't have right the educated populace, right, which are the future leaders of this great nation, feeling that kind of despair, right,
Mhm.
feeling that kind of hopelessness, and that is a symptom of a root cause issue that we need to address. And I believe that we can address that by reminding people of what their powers are here in these United States of America. And so I'm not asking us to go through the process of going for the head fake, right? Going for the pump fake, if you will, and waiting on the electoral process. I'm trying to give us an opportunity to demonstrate that we can affect our political process. And that's why we're going through this experiment to show you that our elected members, our elected representative, are responsive to the people. So we're going to show you how the civic process works by making it work right before your eyes. So very simply put, we have a piece of legislation, two pieces of legislation that are designed to help him and her who bore the battle. And we have this process. Okay, the legislation is Veteran Members Business Loan Act, and then there's another one, which is the Contract Our Veterans Act. Both of those pieces of legislation are queued up in the House and the Senate, and they're ready for approval. We need you to go out to the website that we've created for you to influence your congressman or woman, and that's the New York State Elite Service Disabled Veteran. That URL will pass across the screen. Once you get to this site, you can edify yourself on the mission here at the site. But what we really want you to clue in on are 2 points here. One is the QR code that you see on the site, because this particular effort is going to require some support. Your support would be appreciated. But the Contact Our Congress button is the one that we've put in place there so that you can reach out in a seamless way to your representative and senator. So all you have to do is put your address information in here and hit submit, and then the system is going to bring back your congressman and your senator, and you can either freehand write a note to your congressman or senator and ask them to co-sponsor this legislation, or you can take the example, the template that we have on our website, and wordsmith that to get the language that you need to ask your congressman or your senator to co-sponsor this legislation. We are looking at the number of co-sponsors that are achieved under this effort, because we understand that if we can get this number up to 213, at least this is what AI tells us, these bills are a fait accompli for approval. So our objective is to get the number of co-sponsors on both the House and the Senate side of the equation. I think that this is a different bill because it keeps showing 2025. Anyway, that's just something that I keep seeing when I see it. But at any rate, we want to get this number up to 213 so that we can guarantee that we get this particular provision passed before the midterm. And I've made it clear. Let's bring this one back full screen because I want to I want people to see me when I say this. I made it clear that we are holding our elected officials accountable. Right. This is a benign effort that you can participate in to demonstrate your patriotic commitment to these United States, not your partisan commitment. So we need every congressman or woman and every senator to sign up as a co-sponsor of that legislation before we get it passed. And I say before we get it passed because I'm telling you, it's going to be passed this session.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Now, how significant is having this Contract Our Veterans Act? How significant would that change the game for the veteran population as a whole, and more specifically, the veterans without the service-connected disability?
Very simply put, go and read the legislation. What it does is it corrects a 20-year-old error that my friend Bill Elmore has been working to correct. And what that does is it finally gives our veteran-owned small businesses a whole of government contracting program. And what that means is it means that all of the leadership, all of the ingenuity, all of the creativity that we, the people, invested in those servicemen and women, we can now bring that into the storehouse to contribute to the needs that we have from an economic perspective. And right now, economically, we need to revitalize our manufacturing, right? Assets. Everybody knows that, right? Mm-hmm. Our men and women who served, who bore the battle, are in the best position to help us and assist us with that need. We need to reestablish some quality supply chains that work and function for America and within America. Our men and women who bore the battle, I believe, are the best qualified to participate in that action as well. And the reason that I feel they're best qualified is because I've seen our men and women approach these matters from a patriotic perspective, right? Not a profiteer's perspective, right? And from that point of view, our men and women will take a little bit of a haircut on the price to make sure that other men and women have the opportunity to have continuity of employment. So I'm betting on America, and I'm doubling down on him and her who bore the battle.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Indeed. And what popped up in my mind is about VSOs and the nonprofits. There's so many veteran service organizations and also so many nonprofits that support veterans. We think that it's a good idea that we all come together, right? We all have our, individual lanes, but if we come together and supporting this bill, how we supported when they were about to, challenge our disabilities, and we saw the effects of what happened when we raised our voice up for that. Imagine what we could do from an economic standpoint and from a business standpoint. Like 17 veterans die a day. 17 veterans die a day that we can have an impact on. Like those problems we have the ability to control. So let's work together as that everybody who supports veterans to come together and create a pathway that allows us to be wealthy.
I think that we want to expend some cycles talking about just that issue, because the strength that they have against us as a community is their ability to divide and conquer us, right? Is the systemic ability for them to cause us to jump into our own silos where we can't collaborate and wield our power against them. And I think that we need to talk about that a little bit. I think that there's something systemic in there that we, the people, especially our servicemen and women and our veterans, need to recognize. And while I'm talking here, I'm reminded of a common refrain whenever I go to a military veteran event, whether it's at the American Legion or some conference in Las Vegas. The services tend to compete with each other. What service were you in? Oh, you were Army. I was Air Force. Right.
Mhm.
Oh, you're Marine. Yeah. And we give these little digs at each other, not recognizing that we are all one unified fighting force. But that systematic cultural challenge is something we need to recognize doesn't serve us. Right. We need to recognize that we have to pull that out so that we can communicate to protect each other, even in the fog of war, even in the field of battle, so that if someone on the Army side of the equation is being asked to perform illegal actions that violate Article 92, I had to correct that because I think I said it was Article 19, but Article 92 of the Uniform Code of Military Justice, that Army service member can communicate that message over to his Marine counterpart, who can communicate that message over to the Air Force counterpart, so that the services are unified in the mission of protecting these United States and not doing things that put us in harm's way. I think we need to have a conversation about what has been done to divide and conquer us as a force in the upcoming Patriot reports.
Yes, sir. So, guys, tune back in tomorrow, same place, same time, where we'll be diving in deeper to the VSOs and these veteran nonprofit organizations. Until then, guys, I'm Ratwan Hill, and that is the Mr. Walter Cotton III. Until next time, guys.